A world dominated by sharks, one of nature's most misunderstood predators, exists beneath the ocean's glittering surface. With streamlined bodies and keen senses honed for survival over 400 million years, these ancient creatures are marvels of evolution. Despite their terrifying image, sharks are vital to the health of ocean populations, balance, and marine ecosystems. Their diversity is as fascinating as their role, ranging from the formidable tiger shark to the enigmatic hammerhead. Exploring their world reveals a story of ecological harmony, resiliency, and danger. Here are 6 tales. 2 experienced marine biologists, Dr. Claire Weatherall and Dr. Jonathan Jacques Varnett, set out on what they expected to be a routine research dive in the spring of 2023 off the southern coast of Andros Island in the Bahamas. Known for its abundance of sharks, particularly reef sharks, the area was perfect for their study on shark behavior related to coral bleaching. While tagging sharks for further analysis, their main focus was to assess the ecological health of the region. Claire and Jacques set out from the Pelagic Dawn, a research vessel rented and operated by Emile Santoro, a local captain. About 35 miles from the island, they reached their dive site, known as the Blue Rift, a deep underwater trench surrounded by coral plateaus. While the area teemed with marine life, it had a spooky reputation among fishermen, who often reported strange shark behavior such as increased aggression, irregular swimming patterns, and the mysterious disappearance of smaller marine life. For Claire and Jacques, these tales presented the perfect scientific mystery, though others dismissed them as mere superstition. As they descended, the water darkened, sunlight turning into a faint bluish haze, and they plunged into the cerulean depths. They reached the edge of the trench at around 120 feet. The bare seafloor stood in stark contrast to the vibrant coral ecosystems they had encountered on earlier dives. Claire noticed an eerie silence. There were no small fish in sight. Jacques pointed to the trench's bottom where they made out a group of large, dark shapes. Initially, they thought it was a school of dormant sharks, a common sight in deeper waters. But as they got closer, their curiosity turned to confusion. The sharks lay on their sides, unnaturally still. When Claire realized they weren't sleeping but had passed away, her heart sank. Scattered across the seafloor were the remains of at least a dozen sharks, mostly tiger and bull sharks. Some had deep gashes along their flanks, others were partially decomposed, and a few were missing fins. For Claire and Jacques, seasoned marine biologists, the sight was chilling. They began documenting the scene with close-up shots of the carcasses using waterproof cameras. Unusual bite marks marred the sharks, as though another shark had caused the wounds. But the sheer number of dead sharks suggested something far stranger. There were no discarded nets or fishing lines nearby that could explain the carnage. It seemed as though the sharks had been lured to this spot and killed in a grisly underwater ritual. Jack swam ahead and he continued observing a particularly large bull shark carcass. As he examined it, his flashlight revealed something embedded in the flesh near its dorsal fin, metallic and sharp, resembling shrapnel. Jax carefully pried it loose and placed it in his sample bag for later analysis. Uneasy, he couldn't shake the feeling that the shard didn't belong in the natural world. It looked unclean, almost archaic. Suddenly, Claire felt, more than heard, a low, vibrating hum that pierced the eerie silence of the trench. The deep, throbbing sound seemed to come from the trench itself, resonating through her chest. Jax had already tensed, his eyes locked on the sound's origin. Claire turned to signal him, but before she could act, a massive shadow loomed from below. At least 12 feet long, it was a bull shark. But something was off. Its movements were jerky, nearly mechanical, and its clouded eyes suggested it was blind. Despite the scars matching those of the dead sharks around them, the creature was alive and charging straight at them. Claire kicked hard, trying to avoid it, but the shark's jaws snapped just inches from her leg. The creature was closer to Jax, and he wasn't as lucky. The shark clamped down on his arm, its teeth sinking through his wetsuit and into his flesh. Jax's muffled scream echoed through his regulator. Reacting quickly, Claire pulled the emergency inflator on his buoyancy control device, causing a sudden air burst that startled the shark. It released Jax, momentarily backing off. Realizing they couldn't stay in the trench any longer, Claire grabbed Jax's hand and the two began their emergency ascent. Once they reached the surface, Claire waved frantically at Emile. who was already pulling them aboard the Pelagic Dawn. Struggling to breathe, Claire immediately applied pressure to Jax's heavily bleeding arm while Emile radioed for help. Once back on shore, Jax was rushed to a nearby hospital. Although he would survive, the bite had severely damaged his muscles and nerves, requiring months of surgery and rehabilitation. The incident quickly caught the attention of marine experts and local authorities. A team led by renowned shark behaviorist Dr. Helena Marikova reviewed the video Claire and Jax had captured. Marikova observed the bull shark's unusual aggression and the strange bite patterns on the dead sharks. She hypothesized that the sharks may have been engaged in territorial disputes driven by environmental stressors, such as pollution or water temperature changes. However, the metallic shard found in the carcass only raised more questions. Was there evidence of human intervention, or was it something else entirely? A second expedition to the trench was planned, this time with a larger group of divers and more advanced equipment. The findings only deepened the mystery. It was discovered that the trench had unusually high electromagnetic activity, which some scientists speculated could affect shark behavior. Additionally, more metal fragments were found, suggesting that the sharks might have been injured by a weapon or some sort of underwater equipment. However, no conclusive explanation was reached. Claire and Jax were deeply affected by the experience. Despite his permanent scars, Jax continued his work in marine biology, focusing on shark conservation and advocating for stronger protections for their habitats. Claire, on the other hand, became obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the trench. She wrote several papers on the incident, but the scientific community greeted her theories with skepticism. The Blue Rift remains an enigma to this day. Local legends surrounding the area have only grown stronger, with some claiming the trench is cursed and serves as a graveyard for extinct marine life. The ocean still holds many secrets, some of which even the most seasoned explorers have yet to uncover. Whether the shark graveyard is the result of natural events, human intervention, or something far stranger. The water was exceptionally clear off the coast of Gansbai, a small fishing town in South Africa in the late summer of 2002. Known as the Great White Shark Capital of the world, Gansbai's reputation brought both advantages and disadvantages. Tourists flocked to the area for cage diving, hoping for a glimpse of the notorious predators. However, seasoned divers found a different kind of allure in the nearby reefs. Beneath the waves was a thriving ecosystem full of life, with schools of fish moving like shimmering clouds and vibrant coral in technicolor. For those daring enough to leave the safety of the boats, it offered a tempting yet perilous playground. One of those regulars was 33-year-old diver Mattis Matt van der Leyen, who had been diving in these waters for more than 10 years. Born in Durban, Matt had spent most of his life traveling the South African coast. He just loved the ocean. He wasn't a marine biologist or an adrenaline junkie. As someone who respected the sea and its inhabitants, Matt was known for his calm demeanor and careful planning. Always cautious to avoid unnecessary risks, he had previously dived with smaller sharks. However, even his experience couldn't protect him on that fateful afternoon. Matt arrived in Gansbai early in the morning, stopping for coffee at a small cafe and chatting with the locals. The weather was perfect, blue skies and a light breeze that barely disturbed the water's surface. After weeks of planning, he was eager to explore a lesser-known reef a few kilometers off the coast. Fishermen called it Devil's Crown, as it lay in deeper waters, far from the typical tourist spots. The reef was known for its larger predators, but was also considered stunningly beautiful. However, due to a last-minute illness, Matt's dive partner for the day, a younger man named Elias Koster, had to cancel. Despite this, Matt decided to dive alone, confident in his ability to handle it. By mid-afternoon, he was anchored near the reef on his small rental boat. The area was peaceful, with few fishing boats in sight. After years of diving, he carefully double-checked his equipment before entering the water. The descent was smooth. As the underwater world came into view, the noise from above faded. The reef was stunning. Vibrant coral formations stretched across the ocean floor, teeming with sea fans, darting fish, and the occasional moray eel peeking from cracks. Matt moved slowly, maintaining a respectful distance from the marine life. As he swam deeper, the light from the surface began to fade. The water remained clear, though it grew colder. Matt checked his oxygen levels and adjusted his buoyancy. At 20 meters, he was well within his comfort zone. At that moment, Matt noticed something unsettling: a sudden silence. The fish that had been darting around the coral had disappeared as if they had vanished into the darkness. He paused, letting his instincts take over. Slowly, he turned and scanned the water. That's when he saw it. A great white shark, easily more than 4 meters long, emerged from the murky blue. Its dark dorsal side contrasted sharply with its pale white underbelly, moving with eerie grace. Matt, however, remained calm. He knew not to panic. Abrupt movements could provoke an attack, as he'd read countless stories of shark encounters. Slowly, he began to retreat, keeping his eyes on the predator. Despite his racing heart, he focused on breathing steadily. The shark's small black eyes never wavered as it circled him. At first, it seemed more curious than aggressive. Hoping the shark would lose interest, Matt continued backing away. But then, without warning, the shark abruptly turned and charged, moving with astonishing speed. The shark's razor-sharp teeth sliced through Matt's wetsuit and flesh, clamping down on his abdomen before he could react. It was instantaneous and excruciating. Matt fought back, punching the shark's gills and nose, desperately trying to break free. The water turned red with blood, intensifying the predator's aggression. With a violent shake of its massive head, the shark dragged Matt deeper into the water. As Matt struggled to hold his breath, his regulator came loose. The combination of pain and oxygen deprivation blurred his vision. On the surface, Reuben Fick, a retired fisherman, was piloting a small charter boat when a tourist noticed the thrashing in the water. Reuben grabbed his binoculars and spotted the unmistakable dorsal fin of the shark beneath the surface. Recognizing the danger, he quickly steered the boat toward the commotion, shouting for his passengers to grab the emergency medical kit. When they reached Matt, the water was eerily calm. They found him floating face up, his body pale and limp. The shark had vanished into the depths and was never seen again. Reuben, assisted by a nurse named Annika Joubert, managed to drag Matt aboard the boat. There was a terrible mess of ripped flesh and exposed bone in his abdomen, and his wetsuit was ripped. Even though Annika tried her hardest to stop the bleeding, Matt's injuries were fatal. His pulse was rapidly fading, and he was not responding. Minutes later, he was gone. As the boat raced back to shore, the crew sat in stunned silence. The atmosphere was solemn, the impact of what they had seen beginning to weigh heavily. The event served as a sobering reminder of the ocean's unpredictable nature. It was a devastating loss for Annika that would follow her for years. Furthermore, it marked the end of Matt's lifelong pursuit of the sea's allure and mystique. The diving community was shaken by the swift spread of news about the attack. Matt was remembered by family and friends as a skilled and cautious diver who deeply respected the ocean and its creatures. The tragedy served as a stark reminder that even the most experienced divers are vulnerable to the unpredictable dangers of the wild. In the weeks that followed, local authorities and marine experts debated whether the shark had been provoked or if it was simply a case of misidentification. Some theorized that the predator had been attracted by blood from a nearby fishing vessel, while others believed it was a random encounter in the shark's natural territory. Years later, Matthijs van der Leyen and his tragic day at Devil's Crown were still discussed among divers. Despite the reef's beauty, the ocean remained a stark reminder of the delicate balance between human vulnerability and the raw power of nature. Matt's story became a sobering warning to those who dared to enter the deep. In the summer of 1997, families flocked to Florida's sunny beaches for relaxing getaways. The Harwicks were no exception. Coming from their quiet hometown of Montclair, New Jersey, they traveled to Sanibel Island, a picturesque seaside town known for its calm waters and white sand beaches. Eager to escape the daily grind and enjoy the beauty of the Gulf of Mexico, Dale, his wife Marissa, their 8-year-old daughter Lily, and 12-year-old son Ryan were excited for a week of family fun. Bowman's Beach was known as a family-friendly spot, and that day it seemed like the perfect choice. A peaceful stretch of sand lined with seashells and mangroves, it felt worlds away from the city's hustle. The July sun bathed the Gulf waters, making them warm, calm, and shallow near the shore. The Harwicks set up their spot early with a heap of beach toys for Lily, a cooler full of sandwiches, and a big striped umbrella. Dale Harwick, a history teacher, settled into his chair with a well-worn paperback. Marissa applied sunscreen to Lily's face, while Ryan, recently fascinated by marine life after watching a documentary on ocean predators, waded knee-deep into the water with a small net, searching for crabs and minnows. The day seemed perfect, but the Gulf of Mexico held secrets the Harwicks were about to uncover in the most terrifying way possible. By mid-afternoon, the beach was bustling, but the Harwicks were absorbed in their little world. Lily had built an uneven sandcastle nearby, and Marissa was relaxing with Dale under the umbrella, enjoying iced tea. Distracted by the shimmer of tiny fish darting around his legs, Ryan ventured deeper into the water, reaching waist depth. The glassy surface of the Gulf reflected the clear sky, and the soft sound of the waves gave no hint of the danger just a few feet away. Then it came as a shock. The family was jolted into panic when a shrill scream shattered the peaceful ambience. Marissa turned toward the water, her heart racing as she dropped her drink. Dale, already standing, saw Ryan flailing uncontrollably. His face was twisted in pain as the water around him turned red. For an instant, the scene seemed unreal, nearly unfathomable. But then Dale realized the truth. A shark had attacked his son. Like a freight train, the predator, later identified as a bull shark, clamped down on Ryan's thigh. The bull shark, one of the most dangerous species due to its aggression and ability to enter shallow waters, had struck with horrifying force. Adrenaline overriding all other instincts, Dale ran toward the water. Without thinking, he dove in, reaching for his son as the salt water stung his eyes. Unfazed by Dale's approach, the shark continued to hold Ryan's leg, violently shaking its head as if trying to rip a piece of flesh off. Dale grabbed Ryan's arms and pulled with all his strength, his frantic yells drowning out his son's screams. His left arm came dangerously close to the shark's jaws during the struggle, and the predator quickly shifted its attention to him. The shark's sharp teeth sliced through muscle and flesh with terrifying precision, clamping down on Dale's forearm. Despite the excruciating pain, Dale held on to Ryan, then released him, pushing him toward the shore with one final desperate tug. After wading in up to her knees, Marissa pulled Ryan the remaining distance to the shore, yelling for help as blood spurted from his leg. Nearby beachgoers, stunned at first, quickly sprang into action. Some called 911 while others hurried to assist, but Dale was not so fortunate. The shark, drawn by the blood, made another lunge. This time it grabbed Dale by the torso and pulled him beneath the surface. The water churned violently, turning into a frothy mix of white and red for several terrifying moments. When Marissa called out his name, Dale was already gone. Chaos erupted on the beach. Strangers worked together, using towels and improvised tourniquets to stop the bleeding from Ryan's leg as they carried him to safety. Lily, too young to fully grasp the gravity of the situation, sobbed uncontrollably, clinging to her mother. Marissa, filled with disbelief, kept looking out into the water, refusing to leave the shore. When emergency personnel arrived, they quickly transported Ryan to a nearby hospital. Despite their efforts to reassure Marissa, their somber expressions spoke volumes. Search crews were deployed to find Dale, combing the waters for any sign of him. Hours passed, and as the sun began to set, casting a pink and orange glow over the sky, a rescue boat returned. Bloodied and bruised, Dale's lifeless body was found. There was a flurry of mourning and recovery following the attack. Though Ryan's leg was saved after numerous surgeries, he would carry both psychological and physical scars for the rest of his life. Marissa, devastated by her husband's passing, struggled to hold her family together. Their once normal lives were forever altered when the Harwicks returned to New Jersey a few weeks later. The story of their tragedy became a sobering reminder of the ocean's unpredictable nature in the years that followed. In response to the attack, Bowman's Beach implemented more stringent safety measures, such as increased patrols and shark warning systems. But Marissa felt that no amount of safety could erase the memory of that day. Unable to face the vastness of the ocean without reliving her terror, she completely avoided it. Ryan, however, turned his trauma into a passion for marine life protection. As he grew older, he devoted his life to studying sharks and advocating for their conservation, while also educating others about the dangers they pose. Still, He often questioned whether his survival had come at the expense of his father's sacrifice. The Gulf of Mexico's serene beauty continued to attract thousands of tourists, but for the Harwicks, it would forever be the place of their nightmare. A tragic chapter in a story of love, loss, and survival, Bowman's Beach in 1997 remained etched in their hearts, though time slowly softened the edges of their agony. On a cold morning in 2005, Humboldt County's rocky coastline became the backdrop for a surfer's tragic tale. Shelter Cove, a town nestled between towering cliffs and dense redwood forests, was as remote as it was beautiful. Unlike the more popular beaches to the south, the Pacific Ocean here was dark, frigid, and unforgiving. The area, known as the Lost Coast, earned its name from its bleak, rugged landscape and erratic sea levels. For decades, adventurous surfers had been drawn to its solitude and some of the best waves in California. But the Lost Coast had a reputation for danger, riptide storms, and the occasional appearance of massive predators beneath the surface. Greg Thorson was one such surfer who embraced those risks. At 37 years old, Greg had lived a transient life, traveling from coastal town to coastal town in search of the perfect wave. A familiar face in the local surf scene, he had a wiry build, sun-bleached hair, and a face weathered by years of salt and sun. For just over a year, Greg had been renting a small cabin on the edge of the redwoods in Shelter Cove. To him, the isolation was a draw, not a deterrent. He relished the chance to surf alone, far away from the noise of less experienced surfers and overcrowded beaches. That morning, as he often did, Greg woke before dawn. The air was crisp and the horizon glowed faintly with the promise of sunrise. Greg parked his rusty blue van at a secluded cove known as Devil's Reach, a spot infamous for its powerful waves and hidden underwater rocks. Few surfers dared to take it on, but Greg had claimed it as his home break. He zipped up his thick wetsuit, waxed his board, a battered but reliable 6 feet 6 inches long shortboard, and paddled out into the cold, glassy water. The ocean was eerily quiet, with no other surfers in sight. The waves were slow but building, and Greg floated beyond the break, scanning the horizon for the next set. The isolation and calm were familiar comforts, but as he stared out into the open sea, something felt different. The rhythmic sound of his breathing and the gentle lapping of water against his board were the only noises in the vast expanse. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a pale golden light over the sea. What Greg didn't know, what no one could have known, was that something else was out there with him. The first sign of danger was subtle, almost imperceptible. Beneath the surface, a shadow moved silently, its massive form blending with the dark depths of the ocean. It was a great white shark nearly 15 feet long and weighing over a ton. This stretch of the Pacific was part of what scientists called the Red Triangle, a region notorious for shark activity. The waters were rich with seals, sea lions, and other prey, making it a prime hunting ground. Greg, paddling atop his board with his arms dangling in the water, unwittingly resembled one of those prey animals. As Greg caught a small wave and paddled back out, the shark began to close the distance. It was deliberate, almost methodical, moving with the slow confidence of an apex predator. Greg sat on his board, scanning the horizon for the next wave, unaware that beneath him the shark was circling. The attack was sudden and violent. Greg's right leg was clamped down by the shark's jaws with unfathomable force as it surged upward, knocking him off his board. The water exploded into a chaotic mix of foam and blood, swirling together in a frantic flurry of movement. Greg fought back with every ounce of strength he had left. He kicked, punched, and thrashed at the shark's muzzle, his heart pounding as his instincts took over. But the predator's grip was unyielding. Its sharp teeth sliced into bone and muscle, each bite sending waves of excruciating pain through his body. The force of the attack was overwhelming, but Greg refused to give in. Greg was able to surface for a brief moment, struggling to breathe. His cries were drowned out by the sound of the waves crashing close by. The deep blue contrasted sharply with the blood which spread like ink in the water. There was silence for a while. Greg floated still after the shark released him, his body limp from shock and blood loss. However, the reprieve was brief. Once more, the shark struck viciously and efficiently, biting into his torso. There was a fatal second attack. As Greg sank below the surface, his body went limp and his consciousness dimmed. The shark, having satisfied its primal hunger, disappeared into the depths, leaving behind only a broken surfboard and a faint trail of blood. Despite the violence that had just unfolded, the waves continued rolling in, indifferent to the tragedy. When Greg did not return after several hours, a search was launched. His van was the first clue, parked at Devil's Reach. Authorities and residents scoured the coastline, and the Coast Guard sent a helicopter to survey the waters. Greg's surfboard was found washed ashore, its edges bearing deep gouges from the shark's teeth. However, his body was never recovered. In the days that followed, the small community of Shelter Cove was left in shock. Greg's disappearance became the subject of somber conversations in the town's lone coffee shop and bar, as locals tried to make sense of the horrific event. People who knew Greg spoke of his talent, his quiet determination, and his deep passion for the sea. Locals avoided the water, at least temporarily, while others vowed never to surf alone again. Marine biologists suggested that the attack was likely a case of mistaken identity, with the shark confusing Greg for a seal or sea lion. Yet this explanation did little to comfort those left behind. The tragedy served as a somber reminder of the ocean's power and unpredictability. The vast, stunning waters had claimed another life. Years later, Greg's name became part of local lore, a cautionary tale shared with newcomers and young surfers. His cabin, now slowly being reclaimed by the forest, stood empty. The surf at Devil's Reach still rolled in, its waves crashing against the rocky shore, timeless and indifferent. Somewhere beneath the surface, a silent predator continued to swim in the Pacific's endless depths. In 2007, off the northeastern coast of Queensland, Australia, a popular diving site called the Mariner's Descent attracted adventurers from around the world. The site was home to the wreckage of the Elysian Star, a cargo ship that sank during a violent tropical storm in 1933. The ship lay at the bottom of the Coral Sea, its skeletal remains encrusted with coral and marine life. Over the decades, divers had been drawn to the site by stories of eerie corridors and rumored treasures hidden within the wreck. While the site was renowned for its beauty, it also had a reputation for being dangerous. Tina Arleston, a 32-year-old experienced scuba diver, joined a small expedition to explore the wreck on a warm spring morning. Having dived in remote locations like the Red Sea and the Galapagos Islands, Tina had years of experience and was known for her meticulousness. She always double-checked her equipment and followed safety protocols without fail. The group she joined included Orrin Westlake, the seasoned dive leader, Isla Fenrick, a marine archaeologist with a sharp wit, Zane Rathmore, a reserved man who never seemed to remove his aviator sunglasses, and two local dive assistants nicknamed the Twins, who despite their nickname were not actually related. The group slowly descended through the cold, clear water, their movements calculated and precise as they approached the Elysian Star. At 30 meters deep, the wreck loomed in front of them like a ghostly giant, its barnacle-encrusted hull tilted on its side. Schools of fish swam in chaotic bursts, their scales glinting like scattered coins in the sunlight that filtered down from above. The eerie silence of the ocean around them was broken only by the soft hissing of their scuba tanks and the muffled sounds of their movements. Tina felt her pulse quicken with the rush of adrenaline as they neared the wreck. The hole in the bow was large enough for them to pass through, and as she passed through it, the world inside the ship transformed. The interior was dark, the only light coming from their dive lights, casting eerie shadows on the rusted walls and forgotten cargo. The smell of salt and decay lingered in the water, a reminder of the ship's long-forgotten voyage. Inside, the passageways were narrow and twisted, remnants of the ship's former life now swallowed by the ocean's embrace. Tina moved forward with purpose, excited to explore the parts of the wreck that had been untouched. Her group followed closely behind, making their way through the tight, winding corridors with a quiet, focused energy. But as they ventured deeper into the wreck, Tina couldn't shake the feeling that the ship was watching them, as if it were alive, holding its secrets just beyond reach. The dim, murky water seemed to press in around Tina as she adjusted to the sudden drop in temperature. The metal taste in her mouth, a sign of increased pressure, made her realize just how deep they had gone into the wreck. The once clear water was now clouded with silt and debris, and the cold seemed to seep into her bones. Oren moved forward, his dive light cutting through the darkness, illuminating scattered remnants of barrels and crates that lined the perimeter of the cargo hold. These pieces of the ship's forgotten past had been swallowed by the sea, with only faint outlines left behind in the silt. Tina swept her light over the area, examining the ruins of the ship's cargo. Some crates were completely rotted away, while others were barely recognizable, corroded by decades of saltwater exposure. The others spread out, methodically scouring the area. Tina couldn't help but feel a sense of isolation, as the dark water seemed to consume the space around them. The wreck was vast, but strangely it felt claustrophobic, its tangled passageways and rusted remains trapping them in an oceanic tomb. As she moved further into the hold, Tina's light flickered over something unusual, a piece of debris that seemed oddly out of place. The shape was too distinct, too intact compared to the rest of the wreckage. Her curiosity piqued. Tina swam closer, trying to make sense of the object. The water around her shifted with the current, and for a moment it felt like the ship was shifting with it, groaning under its own weight. She pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the mysterious object ahead. She glanced around, but nothing seemed out of place. Shaking off the uneasy feeling, she moved toward a cluster of crates against the far wall. Her leg brushed against something. She spun around, flashlight sweeping the water. At first, there was nothing. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she caught a swift, dark shadow disappearing into the depths. Before she could react, it hit her. The hammerhead shark lunged from the darkness, slamming into her with terrifying force. Its massive jaws locked onto her side, ripping through her wetsuit and sinking deep into her flesh. Tina's scream rang out, her voice crackling through the radio. As the group searched, their flashlights darted in all directions. Oren's voice crackled over the radio, panic cutting through his usual calm as he shouted that Tina had been hit. Tina flailed, her arms reaching out in desperation, but the shark was relentless. It released her for a moment, then struck again, its jagged teeth sinking into her shoulder. Blood clouded the water, a dark plume swirling in the current. Chaos erupted among the group, voices shouting into their radios as they scrambled to reach her. But the shark was faster and stronger. With one final, powerful lunge, it dragged Tina into the darkness. Her flashlight slipped from her grip, spinning slowly as it sank into the silt below. The group searched desperately, their beams cutting through the gloom, but Tina was gone. The shark had vanished too, leaving only a trail of blood and shredded equipment. Oren's voice shook as he called for an emergency ascent, ordering everyone to surface. Back on the boat, the mood was grim. The twins sat silently, their faces pale, while Isla paced nervously, muttering to herself. Oren radioed the Coast Guard, but everyone knew it was too late. In the days that followed, a thorough search was conducted, but Tina's body was never found. Authorities speculated that the shark, likely a large great hammerhead, had mistaken her for prey. The incident rocked the diving community, and the Elysian Star was temporarily closed to divers. For Oren and the others, the experience left a scar that never fully healed. Tina Arlston's name was etched into a memorial plaque near the dive site, a somber reminder of the risks that come with exploring the unknown. In the quiet year of 2000, the untouched coastline of Ahipara, New Zealand, stretched for miles, framed by rugged cliffs and endless azure waters. Part of the country's renowned 90-mile beach, it was a favorite for adventurers seeking solitude and raw beauty. Despite its allure, the area carried an unspoken reputation for danger. The deep, cold waters just offshore were a haven for marine life, including great white sharks, often drawn closer after storms churned up the seabed. Samuel Sam Radcliffe, a 32-year-old outdoor enthusiast and seasoned paddleboarder, had always found solace in these remote waters. Known for his adventurous spirit and quiet demeanor, Sam had moved to New Zealand from Bristol, England, seeking a life unspoiled by urban chaos. He often spoke of the ocean as a place of peace, unaware of the tragedy that awaited him. Sam packed his paddleboard onto his truck and drove toward Ahipara Beach on a cloudy morning. A recent storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie stillness. The shoreline was deserted, save for a few seagulls skimming the waves. To Sam, the emptiness was perfect. He craved the isolation, the rhythmic sound of his paddle slicing through the water, and the chance to disconnect from the world. By mid-morning, Sam had ventured far from shore. All around him the sea stretched in all directions, a deep glassy blue. He paddled slowly, occasionally glancing down at the dark depths below. Even Sam couldn't ignore the weight of the silence, though the solitude was thrilling. He had received warnings from the locals about this area, known as a shark hunting ground. Sam had dismissed them as exaggerated stories meant to scare tourists. But as he glided farther out, he noticed the water beneath his board growing darker, not from depth, but from movement. A sudden shock sent Sam sprawling into the ocean. His paddleboard, once a symbol of serenity, was now drifting a few feet away, a useless buoy in the vast water. Panic surged as he realized what had happened. A great white shark, nearly 4 meters long, had struck the board, testing it as potential prey. The shark attacked again, its enormous jaws clamping down on Sam's leg before he could react. The force of the bite was unimaginable, and the water around him turned crimson. Sam thrashed, desperate to free himself, but the predator's grip was unrelenting. His attempts to swim back to his board were futile, each movement seeming to provoke the shark further. The attack lasted only moments, but the aftermath was harrowing. The shark released Sam, leaving him to float helplessly in the blood-streaked water. His leg was severely injured and his strength was fading fast. The ocean, once his sanctuary, now seemed an endless, indifferent expanse. Sam clung to his board, hoping against hope for rescue. On shore, a local fisherman named E.R.U. Thompson noticed the commotion far out at sea. E.R.U., a lifelong resident of Ahipara, was familiar with the waters and their hidden dangers. Using binoculars, he spotted the paddleboard and the faint outline of a struggling figure. Recognizing the urgency, he alerted the authorities and launched his small boat in a desperate attempt to help. By the time E.R.U. reached Sam, the situation was dire. Sam was unconscious, his injuries severe, and his body cold from blood loss. E.R.U. pulled him onto the boat and sped back to shore, where paramedics were waiting. Despite their best efforts, Sam was pronounced dead upon arrival. The official cause of death was blood loss and trauma from the shark attack. The news of Sam's death sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community. Ahipara had always been a place where nature's beauty and dangers coexisted, but this incident was a stark reminder of how thin the line between the two could be. Experts later speculated that the storm had stirred up fish closer to the surface, drawing sharks into the area. Sam's movement on the paddleboard likely mimicked that of prey, triggering the attack. In the weeks that followed, local authorities implemented stricter safety measures, including improved signage and patrols in known shark zones. Marine biologists studied the waters to understand shark behavior in the area, while locals shared their encounters and close calls. The incident also sparked debates about human interaction with marine ecosystems and the risks of venturing into their domain. Sam's family, devastated by the loss, chose to honor his adventurous spirit by establishing the Radcliffe Foundation. The foundation was dedicated to promoting ocean safety and supporting shark conservation efforts. While they grieved his death, his family found solace in the idea that Sam's love for the ocean could inspire others to approach it with respect and caution. Samuel Radcliffe's tragic encounter became a somber legend in Ahipara. For those who knew him, it was a reminder of the fragility of life and the power of nature. For others, it served as a cautionary tale, a haunting echo of the risks beneath the ocean's serene surface.